The old clock on the wall showed 8:30 in the evening. Little Lily sat in her favorite spot at the corner booth, her coloring book spread out in front of her. She was carefully filling in a picture of a butterfly, trying to stay inside the lines like her teacher had shown her. This was her usual routine. While her mom finished the evening shift at the diner, Lily would do her homework, color, or sometimes just watch the people come and go. The diner wasn't fancy. The floor tiles were cracked in places, and the red vinyl seats had been patched more times than anyone could count. But it was clean and the food was good, and most importantly, it was home in a way. Lily had spent hundreds of evenings here, and she knew every regular customer by name. Her mom, Rachel, moved between tables with practiced ease. Even after working, since morning, she still managed to smile at every customer. Lily watched her mom refill coffee cups and take orders, always patient, always kind. Sometimes Lily wondered if her mom ever got tired of being so nice all the time. But Rachel had told her once that being kind didn't cost anything, and sometimes a smile was the only good thing that happened to someone all day. The dinner rush had finally ended. Only a few people remained scattered across the booths. An elderly man reading his newspaper, a teenage couple sharing a milkshake, a truck driver eating his usual burger and fries. The gentle hum of the old jukebox in the corner played a song Lily didn't recognize, but it was peaceful. Then the door opened. A young woman walked in, and Lily looked up from her coloring. The woman looked exhausted in a way that Lily had never seen before. She carried a baby on her hip, maybe 6 or 7 months old. The baby was crying, that tired, hungry kind of cry that seemed to go on forever. Holding the woman's other hand was a little boy, probably 2 years old, barely able to walk straight. He stumbled as they came through the door, and his mother caught him quickly. Lily noticed the woman's clothes first. They were clean but worn thin in places, like they'd been washed too many times. Her shoes had a hole near the toe. The woman's face was pale, and she had dark circles under her eyes that made her look much older than she probably was. Rachel noticed them too. She immediately walked over with her warmest smile. "Hi there, honey. Take any seat you'd like. I'll be right with you." The woman nodded but didn't move toward a booth. Instead, she stood at the counter, shifting the crying baby from one hip to the other. The toddler leaned against her leg, his thumb in his mouth, his eyes half closed. Lily watched as the woman opened her purse with shaking hands. She pulled out a handful of crumpled dollar bills and some coins. Lily could see her counting the money, her lips moving silently. The woman counted once, then again, then a third time, as if hoping the amount would somehow change. Rachel came over with her notepad. "What can I get for you tonight?" The woman's voice was barely above a whisper. "How much is the chicken tenders meal?" $7.95. "Comes with fries and a drink." The woman looked down at the money in her hand. "And the kids' meal? $4.50 each." Lily watched the woman's shoulders sag. She looked at her 2 children, then back at the money. I have $16 and some change." Rachel's expression softened. She glanced at Lily, then back at the woman. "Honey, let me see what I can do." But the woman shook her head quickly. "No, it's okay, I can make it work." She took a deep breath. "2 kids' meals, please, just for them." "What about you?" Rachel asked gently. "I'm not hungry." The woman said it too quickly, and everyone knew it wasn't true. Rachel started to say something, probably to offer help, but Lily knew her mom couldn't give away free food. The diner's owner was a nice enough man, but he kept strict track of everything. Rachel had been written up before for being too generous. The woman took her children to a booth near the window. She bounced the crying baby, trying to soothe him, while the toddler climbed onto the seat. Lily could hear her singing softly to them, a lullaby that sounded familiar. Rachel went to the kitchen and came back with 2 kids' meals. But Lily noticed her mom had added extra fries to both plates and filled the cups more than usual. Small kindnesses that wouldn't get her in trouble. Lily looked down at the table in front of her. Sitting there in a white takeout box was her own dinner. Her mom always made sure she ate well, even on the toughest days. Tonight it was her favorite: chicken tenders, crispy fries, and a small container of honey mustard for dipping. Her stomach rumbled. She'd been looking forward to this all afternoon. But she couldn't stop thinking about the woman at the other booth, about how she'd counted that money 3 times, about how she'd said she wasn't hungry when her hands were shaking, about how the baby was crying because he was probably hungry too. Lily had learned about sharing in school. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, always said that sharing was caring. They'd even read a story about a boy who shared his lunch with a friend who'd forgotten theirs. But this felt different. This wasn't just about sharing. This felt more important somehow. She looked at her mom, who was behind the counter now, preparing more orders. Then she looked at the takeout box in front of her, then at the woman trying to make 2 small meals stretched between 3 people. Lily didn't think about it anymore. She just acted. She picked up her takeout box, slid out of the booth, and walked across the diner. Her heart was beating fast, but not from fear. From something else. Something that felt right. The woman looked up when Lily approached the table. Up close, Lily could see she'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy. "Hi," Lily said, her voice small but clear. "Hello, sweetheart." The woman tried to smile. Lily held out the takeout box. "This is my dinner. You can have it." The woman blinked, confused. "What?" "My chicken tenders and fries. You should eat them. You said you weren't hungry, but I think you are." The woman's eyes immediately filled with tears. "Oh, honey, no. I can't take your dinner. That's so sweet, but you need to eat." "I had a big lunch," Lily lied. She hadn't. "And my mom can make me something else later. Please take it." "Sweetheart, really, I can't. Please." Lily set the box on the table. "My mom always says it's good to help people when they need it. And I think you need it right now." The woman stared at the box, then at Lily, then at her 2 hungry children. A tear rolled down her cheek. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." Lily smiled. "Just eat it, okay?" Behind the counter, Rachel had stopped what she was doing. She was watching her daughter with an expression Lily couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe. And sadness, too. The kind of sad, happy look grown-ups got sometimes when something touched their hearts. The woman wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What's your name?" "Lily." "Lily, Thank you. Thank you so much. You have no idea what this means." Lily shrugged. "It's just chicken tenders." But they both knew it wasn't just chicken tenders. It was kindness when kindness was desperately needed. It was hope in a moment of despair. It was a 7-year-old child seeing someone hurting and choosing to do something about it. As Lily walked back to her booth, she felt different somehow. Lighter. Like she'd done something important even though it had been so simple. What none of them noticed was the man sitting in the back corner booth. He'd been there for about an hour, working on his laptop, barely touching his coffee. He wore an expensive suit that looked out of place in the humble diner. His watch probably cost more than most people made in a year. He'd looked up from his screen just in time to see everything. The young mother counting her money. Lily walking over with her dinner. The exchange that followed. And now he sat there, his coffee forgotten, staring at the little girl who'd just given away her meal without a second thought. Something in his chest tightened. A memory, old and painful, pushed its way to the surface. His own mother, counting coins at a grocery store. The shame on her face when she had to put items back because she didn't have enough. The way she'd gone without so he could eat. He'd forgotten that. Or maybe he'd chosen to forget it. Success and money had a way of erasing the hard parts of the past, making them feel like they'd happened to someone else. But watching this little girl, he remembered everything. He closed his laptop slowly and sat back in his booth, his food untouched. His eyes moved from Lily, now back in her corner booth without her dinner, to her mother, who had pulled her daughter into a quick hug before returning to work. Then to the young mother at the window booth, carefully dividing the chicken tenders between her children while taking small bites for herself. The man didn't know it yet, but his life had just changed. All because a 7-year-old girl had chosen kindness over comfort, generosity over hunger, and compassion over convenience. Sometimes the smallest acts create the biggest ripples, and this ripple was about to become a wave. The man's name was Richard, though most people called him Mr. Wellington in business settings. He'd built an empire in real estate, turning small properties into massive developments, making deals that most people only read about in financial magazines. His net worth had more zeros than most people could comprehend. But sitting in that diner booth watching a child give away her dinner, he felt smaller than he had in decades. He paid his bill and left that night without saying a word to anyone. But he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd seen, that little girl's face, the way she'd walked across the diner without hesitation. The W. Her mother had hugged her, pride and worry mixing together in her expression. 3 days later, Richard found himself pulling up to the same diner. He told his driver, Thomas, that he'd be about an hour. Thomas gave him a curious look but said nothing. In the 5 years Thomas had worked for him, they'd never stopped at a place like this. The lunch rush was in full swing. Rachel moved between tables like a dancer, balancing plates and remembering orders without writing anything down. Richard took a booth near the back and ordered coffee and a sandwich he didn't really want. He watched. It took him 20 minutes to spot Lily. She was at the same corner booth working on homework this time. A math worksheet from the looks of it. She chewed on her pencil eraser, her brow furrowed in concentration. Every so often she'd look up and watch her mother work, then go back to her problems. Rachel never stopped moving. She took orders, delivered food, cleared tables, and somehow found time to check on her daughter between tasks. When she passed Lily's booth, she'd ruffle her hair or ask if she needed help with homework. Lily would shake her head and smile, telling her mom she had it under control. Richard noticed other things too. The way Rachel always asked customers how they were doing, and actually listened to their answers. The way she remembered that the elderly man at table 3 liked his coffee black with 2 sugars. The way she laughed at bad jokes and complimented people's children. She wasn't just serving food. She was making people feel seen. He came back the next week, and the week after that. Always the same back booth, always ordering something simple, always watching. Thomas finally asked him about it. Sir, if you don't mind me saying, this is the 5th time we've come here this month. Is everything all right? Richard didn't know how to explain it. The coffee's good, he said, which was partially true but mostly an excuse. What he didn't tell Thomas was that coming to this diner had become the most honest part of his week. In his regular life, everyone wanted something from him. Every conversation was a negotiation. Every smile hid an agenda. But here nobody knew who he was. Nobody cared. He was just another customer in a cheap suit. One evening, Richard arrived later than usual. The dinner rush had ended and the diner was quiet. He ordered his usual coffee and a piece of apple pie. Rachel brought it to his table with her standard warm smile. Haven't seen you here this late before, she said conversationally. Long day at work, Richard replied, which was true. Tell me about it. Rachel laughed. I've been here since 6 this morning. But hey, at least the late shift is quieter. Gives me time to actually talk to people instead of just taking orders and running. She moved to walk away, but something made Richard speak up. Your daughter, she's here a lot. Rachel turned back, and for the first time, Richard saw wariness cross her face. That protective mother instinct. Yes, she is. Why do you ask? Richard realized how that must have sounded. I'm sorry, that came out wrong. I just noticed she does her homework here most evenings. She seems like a good kid. Rachel's expression softened. She's the best kid. Too good sometimes. She worries about everyone except herself. She glanced over at Lily, who was reading a book now. She wants to be a teacher when she grows up. Says she wants to help kids learn because learning is the most important thing in the world. Smart girl. Too smart for her own good sometimes. Rachel smiled, but there was sadness in it. Her school wants to move her to an advanced program, but it costs money we don't have. Field trips, special materials, all that. I'm trying to save up, but... She trailed off, seeming to realize she was sharing too much with a stranger. Sorry, you don't need to hear about my problems. It's fine, Richard said quickly. I asked. After Rachel walked away, Richard sat with his coffee growing cold, his pie untouched. An advanced program. A bright child held back by money. His mother had faced the same struggle with him. She'd worked 3 jobs to afford the private school that had eventually led to his scholarship, then college, then everything that came after. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Daniel, it's me. I need you to look into something. Daniel had been his assistant for 10 years. He was used to unusual requests. What do you need? There's a diner called Rosie's on 5th Street. The waitress there has a daughter, maybe 7 or 8 years old. I want to know about them, but I want this done respectfully. No digging into anything private. Just public records, employment history, that sort of thing. There was a pause. Sir, is everything okay? Just do it, Daniel. And keep it quiet. 2 days later, Daniel sent him a file. Richard read it in his office, high above the city in his glass tower. The contrast wasn't lost on him. Rachel Martinez, 32 years old, widowed 3 years ago when her husband died of cancer, had been a substitute teacher before but couldn't maintain that career, with unpredictable hours and a young daughter. Took the job at Rosie's because the owner let her bring Lily along and the shifts were somewhat flexible. Never missed rent, never late on bills, but nothing left over. Her daughter, Lily Martinez, 7 years old, straight A student.
Teachers described her as exceptionally
bright and uncommonly empathetic. Qualified for the gifted program, but application was pending due to incomplete payment. Information. Richard set down the file and looked out his window at the city below. How many people down there were like Rachel, working themselves to exhaustion, trying to give their children a chance at something better? He thought about his mother again. She'd died 5 years ago, just when Richard's business had really taken off. She'd lived long enough to see him succeed, to know that her sacrifices hadn't been for nothing, but she'd never gotten to enjoy that success. She'd spent her whole life working and then she was gone. Richard had established a foundation in her name. It gave scholarships and grants. It had helped hundreds of people. But sitting in his office reading about Rachel and Lily, he realized something uncomfortable. The foundation had become just another business operation. Applications, committees, bureaucracy. It had lost the personal touch, the direct human connection that his mother had always valued. The next week, Richard was back at the diner. This time, he brought something with him. A newspaper, carefully folded to show the classified section. He circled one ad before he arrived. Rachel came to take his order, and Richard ordered his usual. But before she could walk away, he slid the newspaper across the table. "You should look at this," he said. Rachel picked up the paper, confused. "What am I looking at?" The circled ad. "There's a teaching position open at Bridgemont Academy. It's a good school." Rachel's eyes scanned the advertisement, then narrowed. Bridgemont. That's a private school. Very expensive. Very exclusive. The position pays well. Better than here, anyway. Rachel set the paper down and looked at Richard carefully. Really looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. "Who are you?" "Just a customer who thinks you're wasting your talent serving coffee." "I'm not wasting anything. I'm taking care of my daughter." Her voice had an edge now. "And what I do for a living is none of your business." Richard held up his hands. "You're right. I apologize. I overstepped, but Rachel wasn't done. You've been coming here for weeks. Always watching. Always in that same booth. I'm not stupid. What do you want?" Richard was taken aback by her directness. In his world, people danced around confrontation. They were polite and political. But Rachel was tired and protective, and she wanted answers. "A few weeks ago," Richard began carefully, "I saw your daughter give her dinner to a woman who couldn't afford to feed her kids. She didn't hesitate. She just saw someone who needed help and helped them. It reminded me of something I'd forgotten." "What's that?" "That kindness doesn't require wealth. That the most generous people are often those who have the least to give." He paused. "My mother was a waitress. She worked herself to death to give me opportunities. I became successful, and somewhere along the way I forgot what that struggle looked like. Your daughter reminded me." Rachel's expression softened slightly, but the wariness remained. "So what, you feel guilty and now you want to help?" "Maybe. Or maybe I just want to pay forward what was given to me. By telling me to apply for a job I'm not qualified for?" "You have a teaching degree," Rachel blinked. "How do you know that?" Richard realized his mistake. I looked you up." "Public records," he added quickly, seeing her face change. "I'm sorry. I should have asked first." "You're right, you should have." Rachel picked up his empty cup. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but we don't need charity. We're doing fine." She walked away, leaving the newspaper on the table. Richard sat there feeling like a fool. He'd handled that terribly. In business, he could negotiate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But a simple conversation with a waitress and he'd blown it completely. He left a generous tip and walked out, wondering if he'd just made everything worse. But 2 days later, he was back. Not because he had a plan, but because he couldn't stay away. The diner had become a compass pointing him back to something real. This time, when Rachel came to his table, she set down a cup of coffee and sat across from him. "We need to talk," she said. Richard nodded. "I owe you an apology." "Yes, you do. But I also owe you honesty." Rachel took a breath. "I did apply for that job. Not because you told me to, but because you were right. I am testing my talents here. I love teaching. I'm good at it. And Lily deserves a mother who's following her own dreams, not just surviving." "That's great," Richard said, genuinely pleased. "But I want to be clear about something. If I get this job, it's because I earned it. Not because some rich stranger pulled strings. I wouldn't dream of it." "Good." Rachel stood up. "And for the record, I know who you are now. My friend looked you up online. Richard Wellington. Real estate billionaire, philanthropist." Richard felt exposed. "Does that change anything?" Rachel considered this. "It explains the expensive watch and why you never complain about the coffee even though it's terrible." She smiled slightly. "But it doesn't change what Lily did. She didn't help that woman because she thought someone was watching or because she wanted something in return. She did it because it was the right thing to do. If you really want to honor that, don't just throw money around. Actually understand what people need." With that, she walked away, leaving Richard alone with his thoughts. She was right, of course. He'd been approaching this all wrong. Real help wasn't about grand gestures or surprise interventions. It was about respect, understanding, and giving people the tools to build their own success. Richard pulled out his phone and called Daniel again. "That application for the teaching position at Bridgemont. Make sure it gets reviewed properly. No special treatment, just make sure it doesn't get lost in the shuffle." "Understood, sir." Richard sat back and finally took a sip of his coffee. Rachel was right about that, too. It was terrible, but somehow that made it perfect. 3 weeks passed, and Richard found himself in an unfamiliar position. He was waiting. In business, he made things happen through force of will and unlimited resources. But here, he could only watch and hope that Rachel got the opportunity she deserved. He'd kept his promise. No strings pulled. No calls made to influence the hiring committee at Bridgemont Academy. Daniel had simply ensured her application landed on the right desk at the right time. The rest was up to her qualifications, which, from what Richard had learned, were excellent. The diner had become his refuge. 3 times a week, he'd stop by, sometimes for lunch, sometimes for an early dinner. He'd work on his laptop, take calls, but mostly he watched the life of this small restaurant unfold around him, and he learned things. He learned that the elderly man who came in every Tuesday was a widower named Mr. Patterson, who had nowhere else to go. Rachel always gave him extra coffee and sat with him for a few minutes, just talking. Richard later discovered she'd never once charged him full price, making up the difference from her own tips. He learned that the teenage couple who shared milkshakes were saving money for college. The boy worked at a gas station. The girl babysat neighborhood kids. They came to the diner once a week as their special date, making a $5 milkshake last 2 hours. Rachel always brought them free fries and pretended the cook had made too many. He learned that Lily helped her mother in small ways. She'd clear tables when the diner got busy, never complaining. She'd fold napkins and fill sugar containers. And every single time, Rachel would thank her like she was an employee, not a child being dragged through her mother's struggles. But Richard also noticed the things that hurt to see. He noticed Rachel limping by the end of her shifts, her feet aching in shoes that should have been replaced months ago. He noticed how she'd skip lunch, telling Lily she'd eaten earlier when she clearly hadn't. He noticed the worry lines that appeared whenever she checked her phone, probably looking at bills or bank balances. One afternoon, Richard overheard a conversation that made his chest tight. Rachel was on her break, sitting in a booth near his, talking on her phone. She thought she was being quiet, but Richard caught every word. "Mrs. Chen, I understand, but the field trip isn't for another month. Can I make payments?" Pause. "I know the policy. Lily has been looking forward to this since September. It's a science museum trip, and science is her favorite subject." Longer pause. $300. "Yes, I know." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'll figure something out." Thank you. She hung up and sat there for a moment, her head in her hands. Then she straightened up, wiped her eyes quickly, and went back to work with a smile on her face. Like nothing had happened. Like her heart wasn't breaking. Richard wanted to walk over and write a check right then. $300 was nothing to him. Less than nothing. But he remembered Rachel's words. Real help wasn't about throwing money around. And she'd specifically told him she didn't want charity. Still, watching her pretend everything was fine while clearly falling apart inside felt like torture. That evening, after Rachel's shift ended, Richard saw her talking to the diner's owner, Mr. Kovac. He was a decent enough man, but business was business. Richard couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could read the body language. Rachel was asking for something. Mr. Kovac was shaking his head. Rachel's shoulders slumped. She nodded, thanked him, and turned away. Later, Richard would learn she'd asked for an advance on her paycheck. Mr. Kovac had refused, not out of cruelty, but because he'd already given her 2 advances this year and couldn't afford another. Richard left the diner that night feeling helpless in a way that money couldn't fix. The next morning, he called his foundation's director. Margaret, I need information about our scholarship programs. What specifically? Do we have anything for children of service industry workers? Waitresses, cooks, janitors? Margaret pulled up the files. We have general need-based scholarships, but nothing specifically targeting that demographic. Why? Because we should. Those are the people who need it most and ask for it least. Richard thought for a moment. I want to establish a new program. Education support for children whose parents work in service jobs. Not just tuition, field trips, supplies, everything kids need to fully participate in school. That's a wonderful idea. When would you like to launch this? Yesterday? Richard caught himself. Sorry, as soon as possible. Fast track it. I'll get the team on it immediately. But even as he gave the order, Richard knew it wouldn't help Lily in time for her field trip. New programs took months to establish properly. Applications, vetting processes, legal framework. By the time it was operational, Lily's museum trip would be long past. That afternoon, Richard found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. He went shopping, not online shopping with an assistant handling everything, actually walking into stores and looking at things. He bought a children's science book about space, then another about oceans, then a whole set about different scientific topics. He told himself he was just browsing, but he bought them anyway. He also noticed a beautiful microscope kit designed for kids, perfect for a curious mind like Lily's. Back in his car, Thomas gave him a knowing look. Shopping for someone special? Richard looked at the bags. I don't even know if I can give these to her. Sometimes the best gifts are the ones we want to give, whether we can or not. That evening, Richard returned to the diner. He'd left the purchases in his car, unsure what to do with them. Rachel was wiping down tables, preparing for the dinner shift. Lily was at her usual spot, but something was different. She wasn't doing homework or coloring. She was just sitting there, looking sad in a way that 7-year-olds shouldn't look sad. Richard ordered coffee and watched. Rachel came over to Lily's booth and sat down beside her daughter. Hey, sweet pea, what's wrong? Nothing, Mama. Lily. Rachel's voice was gentle but firm. I'm your mother. I can tell when something's bothering you. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then in a small voice, Chloe and Aiden were talking about the museum trip today. They're so excited. Chloe said there's a real dinosaur skeleton there, not a model. A real one, Rachel's face fell. Lily, it's okay, Mama, I know we can't afford it. Lily tried to smile. There will be other trips, and Miss Peterson said she'll show me pictures when they get back. Rachel pulled her daughter into a hug and Richard had to look away. The casual cruelty of poverty. A child missing out on wonder because of $300. He made a decision then. Maybe not the right one, but the only one he could live with. The next day, Richard called the school directly. He identified himself and asked to speak with the principal. Mr. Wellington, what an honor. How can I help you? I understand you have a field trip coming up. To the Science Museum. Yes, next month. It's an annual trip for our gifted program students. I'd like to sponsor it. Fully. For any student whose family can't afford the fee. There was a pause. That's incredibly generous. One condition. It's anonymous. No press release. No plaque with my name. The families should simply be told that a scholarship fund is covering the costs. Nothing more. Of course, if that's what you prefer. It is. And make sure the Martinez girl is included. Lily Martinez. I'll see to it personally. Richard hung up, feeling better and worse at the same time. Better because Lily would get to go on her trip. Worse because he'd gone behind Rachel's back after promising not to interfere. But what was done was done. A week later, Richard was at the diner when Rachel came rushing over to Lily's booth, her face bright with surprise. "Lily, you'll never believe this," the school called. "You're going on the field trip." Lily looked up confused. "What? How?" They said a scholarship fund opened up. It's covering the cost for students who need financial help. You qualified. Rachel was practically bouncing. You get to see the real dinosaur skeleton. Lily's face transformed, pure joy. The kind of happiness that makes everything worthwhile. She jumped up and hugged her mother so hard they both nearly fell over. Richard smiled into his coffee cup. Worth it. Whatever consequences came, this moment was worth it. But Rachel's joy was tempered by something else. Suspicion. Her eyes scanned the diner, and they landed on Richard. She held his gaze for a long moment. She knew. After Lily calmed down and returned to her homework, Rachel walked over to Richard's booth. She didn't sit down. Just stood there, arms crossed. "That was you," she said quietly. Richard considered lying, but Rachel deserved better. "Yes, I told you I didn't want charity." "It's not charity. It's a scholarship program. Several students will benefit. But you started it for Lily. I started it for all the kids like Lily. Kids who deserve opportunities but whose parents are one unexpected bill away from disaster." Richard met her eyes. "Your daughter's face just now, that joy, that's worth more than the money spent." Rachel was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "You don't understand. Every time someone helps us, I feel like I'm failing as a mother. Like I can't provide for my own child. That's not failure. That's life being unfair." Richard leaned forward. "Your daughter is brilliant and kind because of you, not despite your struggles. You're not failing. You're succeeding in the most important way possible." A tear rolled down Rachel's cheek. She wiped it away quickly. "I don't know whether to thank you or tell you to stop. You don't have to do either. Just let Lily enjoy this experience. She deserves it." Rachel nodded slowly, then walked away without another word. Richard sat there wondering if he'd just made things better or worse. The line between helping and insulting was finer than he'd realized. Every intervention, even with good intentions, carried the weight of wounded pride and damaged dignity. He thought about his own mother. How she'd accepted help when necessary but hated every moment of it. How she'd worked twice as hard afterward, as if to prove she hadn't needed it in the first place. Pride was a complicated thing when you had nothing else to hold on to. That night, Richard made another call to Daniel. "I need you to look into something else for me, quietly." "What now?" "The woman from a few weeks ago. The one with 2 small children. The one Lily gave her dinner to. I want to know if she's okay. That might be difficult to track down. Try. Her name might be in the diner's records if she's used a credit card there. Or ask around the neighborhood. Someone knows something." 3 days later, Daniel called back. "I found her. Her name is Claire. She's been living in her car with her 2 kids. There's a restraining order against her ex-husband. She's been trying to get into transitional housing, but there's a wait list." Richard closed his eyes. "How long is the wait list?" 6 months, maybe longer." "That's unacceptable. What else?" "She applied for food assistance but got denied because of some paperwork issue. She's been going to food banks and churches, barely surviving." Richard thought about what he'd seen that night. The woman's trembling hands, her exhausted face, her children's hungry cries, and he thought about Lily, who'd seen someone hurting and immediately tried to help. Sometimes, he realized, the simplest acts of kindness revealed the biggest failures of society. A woman and 2 babies living in a car while paperwork was being processed. A little girl missing educational opportunities over a few $100s. These weren't complicated problems. They just required someone to care enough to solve them. "Daniel, I need you to do something for me." "Sir, with respect, I think you might be getting too personally involved in this." "Probably, but I'm doing it anyway. Contact our real estate division." "We have apartments, right?" "Empty ones between tenants?" "Yes, several." "Get Claire into one. Subsidized rent until she gets back on her feet. And put me in touch with a good social worker. She needs help navigating the system." Consider it done." Richard hung up and looked out his office window. The city stretched below him. Millions of people living their lives, facing their struggles. He couldn't help everyone, but he could help some. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Back at the diner, Lily was making plans for the museum trip, her excitement bubbling over as she told her mother about everything she wanted to see. Rachel listened with a smile, but her eyes kept drifting to the back booth where Richard sat, working on his laptop. Their lives had become intertwined in unexpected ways, and neither of them knew yet just how much deeper those connections would go. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Rachel held the envelope in her hands, staring at the return address. Bridgemont Academy. Her hands shook slightly as she opened it. She'd almost forgotten about the application, almost convinced herself it had been a foolish dream, applying to such a prestigious school. Why would they want someone who'd spent the last 3 years serving coffee and clearing plates? But as she read the letter, her breath caught in her throat. They wanted to interview her. Rachel read it 3 times to make sure she wasn't misunderstanding. They were impressed with her credentials. Her letters of recommendation from her previous teaching positions had been glowing. They wanted to meet with her next week. She looked over at Lily, who was getting ready for school. Her daughter was carefully packing her backpack, making sure she had everything she needed. Always so organized. Always so responsible. Too responsible for a 7-year-old. "Mama, are you okay?" Lily had noticed her mother's strange expression. "I'm better than okay, baby." "Come here." Lily walked over and Rachel showed her the letter. "Remember that job I applied for? The teaching one?" Lily's eyes went wide. "They want you? They want to meet me first. An interview. But yes, it's a chance." Lily threw her arms around her mother's waist. "You're going to get it." "You're the best teacher ever." Rachel laughed, blinking back tears. "We'll see, sweet pea. We'll see." But inside she was terrified. This was the opportunity she'd dreamed about. But it also meant change. Big change. The diner was familiar, safe in its own way. She knew what to expect. A teaching job at Bridgemont would mean new challenges, new pressures, new people to prove herself to. That evening at the diner, Rachel couldn't hide her nervous energy. She moved faster than usual, her mind clearly elsewhere. Mr. Kovac noticed. "You okay, Rachel? You seem jumpy." "I'm fine. Just have a lot on my mind." "Anything I can help with?" Rachel hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "I have a job interview next week. Teaching position." Mr. Kovac's face fell slightly, but he recovered quickly. "That's great, Rachel, really. You've always been too good for this place, and I meant that's not true. You've been good to me and Lily. Still, you should teach. It's what you were meant to do." He paused. "If you get it, I'll be sad to see you go, but I'll be happy for you. You deserve good things." "Thank you," Rachel said, her voice thick with emotion. Later that night, Richard came in for his usual coffee. Rachel brought it to his booth and for the first time sat down across from him without being asked. "I got an interview," she said without preamble. Richard smiled. "That's wonderful. When?" "Next Tuesday." "I'm terrified, don't be. You're perfect for this." Rachel studied his face. "Did you have anything to do with getting me this interview?" Richard met her gaze steadily. "I made one phone call. To ensure your application was reviewed. That's all. Everything else was you, your qualifications, your experience, your recommendations. I didn't influence the hiring committee. I wouldn't even know who they are." Rachel wanted to be angry, but she couldn't quite manage it. "You just can't help yourself, can you?" "Apparently not," Richard smiled ruefully. "But in my defense, I only made sure you got a fair shot. What happens next is entirely up to you. What if I mess it up? What if they realize I'm just a waitress who hasn't taught in years? First, you're not just anything. You're a mother who's worked herself to exhaustion to give her daughter a good life. You're someone who's maintained her kindness despite impossible circumstances. And second, teaching isn't something you forget. It's who you are." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say exactly what I need to hear." Richard laughed. "Trust me, that's a recent skill. Usually I'm terrible at this sort of thing." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Rachel said, "Tell me about your mother." Richard was surprised by the question. "What do you want to know?" "You said she was a waitress, that she worked herself to exhaustion for you. Tell me about her." Richard took a deep breath. He rarely talked about his mother. even though he thought about her constantly. Her name was Helen. She immigrated from Poland when she was 19, barely speaking English. My father left when I was 3. She raised me alone, working 2, sometimes 3 jobs. That must have been hard. It was, but she never complained. Not once. Richard stared into his coffee cup. She worked at a diner, actually. A lot like this one. I'd do my homework at a booth, just like Lily, and I'd watch her smile at customers even when her feet were bleeding in her shoes. Even when people were rude to her, she just kept smiling. Sounds like she was strong. The strongest person I ever knew. Richard's voice was rough. She died 5 years ago. Lung cancer. Ironic since she never smoked, but decades of working in diners with poor ventilation. Brett. Hing in grease and smoke from the kitchen. The doctor said that's probably what did it. I'm so sorry. The worst part is that she died just when I could finally take care of her. I'd made enough money to give her everything she'd ever wanted. A nice house, travel, rest, but she got maybe 2 years of comfort before the cancer took her. He looked up at Rachel. That's why I do this, why I can't help interfering, because I see her in every struggling parent. And I think if I'd helped her sooner, if I'd worked harder, moved faster, maybe she'd still be here. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You know that's not true, right? You can't save everyone, and from what you've told me, your mother wouldn't want you to carry that guilt. Knowing something and feeling it are different things. Tell me about it. Rachel smiled sadly. I carry guilt every day, that Lily has to spend her evenings in a diner instead of at home, that she wears secondhand clothes while other kids have new ones, that she's missing out on so much because I can't afford to give it to her. But look at what you have given her. She's kind, generous, brilliant, and happy. Those things don't come from money. They come from you. They sat there, 2 people from completely different worlds connected by shared struggles and the weight of responsibility. For Richard, it was the most honest conversation he'd had in years. The following Tuesday, Rachel wore her best outfit to the interview. It was a simple dress, a few years old but well-maintained. She'd borrowed shoes from a friend because her own were too worn. Lily had helped her pick out jewelry, finally settling on a simple necklace that had belonged to Rachel's mother. You look beautiful. Mama, Lily said that morning. I look nervous. Rachel corrected, beautiful and nervous. You can be both, Rachel laughed despite her anxiety. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. The interview was at 2 o'clock. Mr. Kovac gave Rachel the afternoon off without question. She dropped Lily at school, then spent an hour sitting in her car, reviewing her notes and trying to calm her racing heart. Bridgemont Academy was beautiful. Old brick buildings with ivy climbing the walls, manicured lawns, children in uniforms walking between classes. It looked like something from a movie. Nothing like the public school Lily attended. The receptionist directed her to the administrative building. Principal Morrison greeted her warmly, as did the 2 other people on the interview panel. They asked standard questions about her teaching philosophy, her experience, her goals. Rachel answered honestly. She talked about believing every child could learn, about adapting lessons to different learning styles, about making education exciting and relevant. She told them about the innovative projects she'd done in her previous positions, before life had derailed her career. They seemed impressed, but Rachel had no way to know for sure. These people were professionals. They probably seemed impressed with everyone. At the end, Principal Morrison asked one final question. Ms. Martinez, I noticed there's a gap in your resume. 3 years working at a diner. Can you talk about that? Rachel's heart sank. This was it. The moment they'd realized she wasn't good enough. But she'd promised herself honesty. My husband died 3 years ago, she said quietly. Cancer. He fought hard, but in the end we lost him. After that, I needed a job with flexible hours so I could be present for my daughter. Substitute teaching wasn't enough, and full-time positions didn't offer the flexibility I needed. The diner job let me bring my daughter with me. It wasn't glamorous, but it meant I could be both a mother and a provider. The 3 interviewers were quiet. Then Principal Morrison smiled. Ms. Martinez, can I tell you something? Half of our teachers here are parents. And the best teachers are often those who understand that children are whole people, with lives and struggles outside the classroom. Your experience hasn't hurt you. It's shown you a side of life many educators never see. You've served families from all walks of life. You've seen real struggle. That empathy will make you a better teacher. Rachel felt tears threatening but held them back. "Thank you. We'll be in touch by the end of the week." Rachel left the interview in a daze. She couldn't tell if it had gone well or not. But she'd been honest, and that was all she could do. She picked up Lily from school and headed to the diner for her evening shift. Lily chattered about her day, about a science experiment they'd done in class, about a book she was reading. Rachel listened, grateful for her daughter's endless optimism. Richard was already at his usual booth when they arrived. He looked up and caught Rachel's eye, raising his eyebrows in question. She shrugged, unsure what to communicate. He nodded, understanding. The evening passed in a blur. Rachel went through the motions of her job, but her mind was elsewhere. What if they didn't hire her? What if they did? Both options were terrifying in different ways. Around 7 o'clock, a woman entered the diner. Rachel was at another table, so she didn't see her at first. But Lily did, and the look on her daughter's face made Rachel turn. It was Claire, the young mother Lily had given her dinner to all those weeks ago. But she looked different, healthier, less exhausted. She was still with her 2 children, but now they were all wearing clean clothes that fit properly. The baby wasn't crying. The toddler was smiling. Claire spotted Lily and her face lit up. She walked over to their corner booth. "I've been hoping to see you again," Claire said. "I wanted to thank you," Lily beamed. "For the chicken tenders?" Claire laughed. "For more than that. You started a chain of events that changed my life. After that night, someone reached out to me. I don't even know who, but they helped me get housing, connected me with resources, helped me get food assistance sorted out. I start a new job next week. I have an apartment. My kids have stability." She had tears in her eyes. "And it all started because a little girl saw someone struggling and chose to help. So thank you, Lily. Thank you so much." Lily didn't know what to say. She just smiled and said, "I'm glad you're doing better." Rachel watched this exchange with her hand over her heart. She glanced at Richard in his back booth. He was very carefully not looking at them, focused intently on his laptop. But Rachel saw the slight smile on his face. She knew he'd helped Claire just like he'd helped with the scholarship fund. After Claire left with her children, Rachel walked over to Richard's booth. "That was you too, wasn't it?" Richard looked up innocently. "I don't know what you mean. The housing. The resources, Claire," Richard shrugged. "I might have made a few phone calls. Connected some dots. But she did the hard work herself." Rachel shook her head, but she was smiling. "You're impossible. I've been told that before. I should be angry with you for interfering again. But you're not?" Rachel sighed. "No, I'm not. Because unlike with me, Claire didn't have pride in the way. She needed help desperately, and you gave it to her. That little girl gets to grow up in a stable home because of you. How can I be angry about that? Your daughter started it. She showed me what was possible, what was necessary. She does have a way of seeing what needs to be done and just doing it. No hesitation. No overthinking." Rachel smiled. "I wish I could be more like her." "I think you're more like her than you realize." They were interrupted by Mr. Kovac calling Rachel back to the kitchen. A large order had just come in. Rachel gave Richard one last look, something like gratitude and exasperation mixed together, then hurried off. Richard watched her go, watched Lily at her booth working on homework, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not the abstract purpose of running a business or managing a foundation, but direct human purpose. The satisfaction of helping people whose names he knew, whose struggles he'd witnessed, whose victories he could celebrate. His phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "The quarterly board meeting has been moved to Thursday. You're expected to present the expansion plans, right? The real world, the business empire that kept running whether Richard paid attention or not. For weeks he'd been so focused on the diner, on Rachel and Lily and Claire, that he'd let other things slide. His assistant had been handling meetings. His second in command had been making decisions. And somehow everything had continued just fine without him. What did that say about his importance, or about what really mattered? Richard typed back a quick confirmation, then closed his laptop. He had work to do, decisions to make, money to move around. But tonight, sitting in this simple diner, watching a hardworking mother and her kind daughter, he felt more grounded than any board meeting had ever made him feel. Sometimes the smallest moments held the biggest truths, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, those moments reminded you of who you used to be. Before success complicated everything. Richard was beginning to remember. And in remembering, he was becoming someone better than he'd been in a very long time. The phone call came on Friday morning. Rachel was in the middle of pouring coffee for a customer when her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She glanced at the screen and her heart stopped. Bridgemont Academy. She excused herself and stepped into the storage room, hands shaking as she answered. Ms. Martinez? This is Principal Morrison from Bridgemont Academy. Yes, hello. Rachel's voice came out as a squeak. I'm calling with good news. We'd like to offer you the position. Third-grade teacher starting next month. If you're still interested, of course. Rachel had to lean against the wall. Yes,